The rain fell softly against the window pane of the small, quiet workshop at the edge of the sleepy valley. Inside, the only sounds were the slow, rhythmic ticking of 100 wooden clocks and the gentle rustle of falling leaves outside. In this workshop lived an old craftsman named Samuel and his young grandson, Leo. Samuel was known throughout the province not just for his incredible skill in carving intricate timepieces, but for his deep, unwavering calm. He moved through life with a quiet grace, waking before the dawn, attending to his work with deliberate care, and treating every small task as if it were a sacred ritual. Leo, however, was restless. At 17, his mind was a tempest of fleeting desires, scattered dreams, and constant frustration. He wanted to achieve great things, to build magnificent creations that the world would admire, but every time he sat down to work, he found himself distracted. Minutes turned into hours of idle daydreaming. When his chisels slipped or his would split, he would throw his hands up in defeat, complaining that he simply lacked talent, or that life was unfair. One evening, as twilight cast long amber shadows across the dusty workbench, Leo slumped into a chair, staring at a half-finished wooden gear that had cracked under his hurried hands. He squeezed his eyes shut, his voice thick with emotion. He asked his grandfather why life felt so heavy, why success felt like a distant mountain he could never climb, and why Samuel insisted on a life filled with endless, repetitive rules and daily routines. He believed that discipline was nothing more than a cage designed to strip away joy and freedom. Samuel stopped his work. He carefully laid down his polishing cloth, looked at the frustrated boy, and smiled with a warmth that seemed to melt the cold evening chill. He did not scold Leo. Instead, he invited the young boy to walk with him into the high garden behind the shop. The night air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. In the middle of the garden stood a magnificent bamboo grove, tall, straight, and green, reaching up toward the moonlight. Next to it grew a wild, tangled thorn bush that had spread wildly in every direction, its stems choked by weeds, its flowers weak and drooping under their own messy weight. Samuel stood before the bamboo and softly touched one of the sturdy stalks. He explained to Leo that many years ago, when he planted the bamboo, nothing appeared above the soil for 4 full years. For 4 long years, he had to water it, tend to the soil, and protect it every single day, even when there was no visible reward, no sign of progress, and no proof that his effort was paying off. During those 4 years, beneath the dark, unseen earth, the bamboo was building an intricate, unbreakable system of roots. It was disciplining itself in silence. And then, in the 5th year, it burst through the soil, growing over 80 feet tall in a matter of weeks. Samuel turned to Leo and told him that discipline is not a prison created to limit a person. It is the invisible root system of the human soul. Without deep roots, when the storms of life arrive, a person is blown away like dust. The wild thorn bush grew freely without order or focus, spreading everywhere at once. But because it lacked structure, it strangled its own potential and bore no sweetness. The old man gently placed a hand on Leo's shoulder, reminding him that discipline is not self-punishment. It is the highest form of self-love. It is the decision to choose what you want most over what you want right now. That night, something shifted deep within Leo's heart. He realized that his lack of discipline was not giving him freedom. It was holding him prisoner to his own fleeting impulses, leaving him empty and unfinished, just like the broken gear on his bench. The next morning, before the sun crested the mountains, Leo woke up on his own. The morning air was cold, and his body begged him to stay under the warm blankets, but he remembered his grandfather's words. He stood up, took a deep breath, and walked down to the workshop. He cleared his workbench, removing every piece of clutter until only his tools remained. He took the cracked piece of wood, set it aside without anger, and began fresh with a new block of cedar. He forced himself to slow down. When his mind tried to wander toward the end result, he gently brought his focus back to the present moment, to the single stroke of the chisel, the feel of the wood grain, the rhythm of his own breathing. Every time frustration rose in his chest, he treated it not as an enemy, but as a test, choosing patience over panic. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. There were mornings when Leo felt tired, mornings when he felt uninspired, and afternoons when progress felt impossibly slow. But he no longer relied on motivation, which comes and goes like the wind. He relied on his commitment to the daily practice. He embraced the quiet beauty of doing the work, step by step, hour by hour. Slowly, almost magically, his life began to transform. The chaotic noise in his mind settled into a calm, steady focus. His hands grew precise and confident. The daily routine he once feared became his greatest sanctuary, a sacred space where he discovered who he truly was. 1 year later, on a golden autumn afternoon, Leo laid down his tools and looked at the creation resting on his table. It was a masterpiece, a grand astronomical clock carved entirely from rich walnut and polished cedar, every gear moving in flawless, harmonious rhythm, singing a soft, eternal melody of perfect alignment. Samuel walked up behind his grandson and looked at the clock, then looked into the boy's eyes. He saw a young man who was no longer controlled by fear, distraction, or impatience. He saw a man who had built a foundation of inner strength that could never be broken. Tears welled in Leo's eyes, not from sadness, but from a profound sense of peace. He understood now that discipline was never about restricting his life. It was the very key that had unlocked his freedom, his mastery, and his peace of mind. The river does not carve through solid rock because of its raw strength, but because of its relentless persistence. When you master your daily habits, you master your mind. And when you master your mind, you master your destiny. Sit quietly now. Let the noise of the world fade away. Remember that every small choice you make today, every moment you choose focus over distraction, patience over anger, and effort over ease, you are planting the deep, silent roots of your own future greatness. Embrace the practice. Honor the journey. Trust the process.